Have you ever witnessed someone act as if they are above all rules, simply because they have money, status, and power? That feeling that certain people enter a place already believing that everyone there is inferior, invisible, or disposable? Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to discover may surprise you more than you imagine. The story begins in an environment where power seems to ooze from the walls. An imposing building, a glass facade reflecting the sky, impeccable security, and a silent atmosphere that only exists in places where million-dollar decisions are made every day. It is in this setting that the billionaire emerges. He doesn't enter, he invades the space. Each step is firm, calculated, accompanied by a gaze that doesn't ask permission. The tailored suit, the expensive watch, the cell phone always in hand. Everything about him communicates the same message. I'm in charge here. From the very first seconds, it's clear that this man is used to being obeyed. People move around him cautiously, some out of respect, others out of fear. He speaks loudly, interrupts, laughs disdainfully. There's no doubt in his mind that no one in that place occupies the same level as him. And perhaps that's exactly what makes him feel untouchable. Have you ever seen anyone like that? Someone who confuses power with the right to humiliate. As he walks through the corridors, the social contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, luxury, arrogance, the absolute certainty of superiority. On the other, ordinary people doing their jobs, often ignored, underestimated, or treated as part of the decor. The billionaire observes everything as if he were evaluating a product, not human beings. He doesn't imagine, not for a second, that this environment holds something that could turn his reality upside down. There's a strange energy in the air, almost imperceptible, but real. Something seems out of place. Maybe it's the silence that lingers too long, after one of their speeches or the discreet glances exchanged between employees. Maybe it's just that unsettling feeling that overconfidence often precedes great falls. Have you ever felt that before, when you realize someone is about to make a mistake without even suspecting it? The billionaire walks confidently, convinced that everything there revolves around him. For him, it's just another appointment, another meeting, another place where his name opens doors and shuts mouths. He doesn't bother to carefully observe who is in front of him. He doesn't pay attention to the details, the restrained gestures, the serene posture of someone who doesn't need to prove anything. After all, in his logic, those who have money never lose. But it is precisely at this point that the story begins to gain another layer. Because while he feels in absolute control, something invisible is being prepared. Something that doesn't depend on shouting or public humiliation. Something silent, formal, and definitive. The kind of thing that doesn't arrive with a bang, but changes everything when it finally reveals itself. What this billionaire doesn't yet know is that his arrogant attitude, his sense of superiority, and his belief that he's above everyone else could cost him far more than he imagines. And that's where everything starts to fall into place. Stay with me until the end, because from here on out, every detail matters. And the next moment in this story is where the game really starts to change. And perhaps that's exactly why stories like this affect us so much, because on some level, we've all been in an environment where someone felt too important to see the other person. We've all seen the weight of status speak louder than respect, and silence swallow those who were treated as if they had no value. If this topic resonates with you, stop for a moment and think, what has touched you most so far? Have you ever experienced something similar? Witnessed a scene like this, or felt this kind of over-the-shoulder glance firsthand? Share it in the comments, because your experience might resonate with someone watching now who needs to hear exactly this. As this story unfolds, it's worth remembering that each like here isn't just an automatic click. It shows that this type of content needs to continue existing, that stories of justice, social upheaval, and reverse humiliation still matter. When you like the video, you help this message reach more people who may be on the other side of the screen, disillusioned, thinking that certain actions never have consequences. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with stories that provoke reflection and awaken something within those who watch. And if you feel that this type of narrative grabs your attention, makes you think, disturbs you, and at the same time brings that feeling of the truth will come out eventually, consider subscribing to the channel. It's not just about numbers. It's about building a community of people who enjoy real, intense stories that show how the power game can turn when you least expect it. Subscribing is a silent way of saying, I want to keep following this, I want to be a part of it. Because what comes next in this story is exactly the kind of moment that makes us rethink hasty judgments, appearances, and absolute certainties. Overconfidence will still be put to the test, and the environment that seemed so controlled begins, little by little, to reveal another side. Stay with me, because the next step in this story happens when nobody is laughing anymore. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's precisely at this point that the story ceases to be solely about power and begins to touch on something much more sensitive, almost invisible, but profoundly human. In the midst of that sophisticated environment, where everything seemed to revolve around strategic decisions and impressive numbers, something happens that wasn't on the agenda of any meeting, but which completely changes the atmosphere of the place. Her presence, a black woman, discreet, with a firm posture and attentive gaze. She doesn't draw attention through the volume of her voice, nor through a need to assert herself, and perhaps that's precisely what's unsettling. The billionaire notices her, but not as one notices someone important. It's a quick, assessing glance, laden with silent judgments. In a few seconds he decides who she is, what she represents, and what place she should occupy. And that's when the unexpected public humiliation occurs, not in the form of shouting or direct aggression, but of the cruelest kind, disguised as formality. He questions her presence, interrupts her speech, dismisses an observation as irrelevant. He uses a tone that is too polite to be challenged, but cold enough to hurt. The surrounding silence becomes heavy. Some people lower their eyes. Others pretend to review papers, as if they don't see what's happening. It's the kind of situation where injustice takes hold without the need for explicit offensive words. A gesture, an intonation, the way someone is treated as if they were invisible is enough. And those who witness it feel that tightness in their chest, the contained outrage, because they recognize the scene. It has happened in many places, in many different ways. The most striking thing, however, is not his attitude, it's her reaction, or rather, the absence of the reaction. Everyone expected. She doesn't justify herself, doesn't raise her voice, doesn't try to prove anything. She remains calm, serene, almost impenetrable. She observes, she listens, she absorbs every detail. There's a silent strength there, a mindset built over a journey that no one in that room knows. While he believes he's in control, she understands something he completely ignores. This calmness is disconcerting, because we're used to thinking that strength needs to be loud, that dignity needs to be defended aloud. But there's another logic at work there, a hidden truth revealed behind the scenes of the posture, in the way it remains whole even when diminished. It's not passivity, it's strategy, it's awareness. It's someone who knows exactly who they are, even when they try to reduce them to less than that. The atmosphere becomes awkward. The meeting continues, but nothing is the same anymore. The billionaire keeps talking, perhaps even more confident, believing he won that small social clash. For him, it was just another demonstration of authority, another decision made without resistance. He doesn't realize he has just made a profound mistake, not only moral, but strategic. Because when someone underestimates another, they reveal more about themselves than they imagine. There is something transformative happening in this moment, a kind of invisible crack in the power structure. This woman's journey, marked by choices, preparation, and silent decisions, begins to align with a twist that is not yet fully revealed. And it is precisely this waiting, this interval between humiliation and revelation, that carries the greatest emotional impact of the story. The viewer feels that something is accumulating, that this silence is not empty, but laden with meaning. Meanwhile, the billionaire remains unaware that his actions have just triggered forces beyond his control. This isn't about immediate revenge, nor an impulsive response. It's about consequences, the kind that arrive late but arrive precisely. Truth rarely prevails in the heat of the moment. It prefers the right time, the right setting, the right impact. And it is at this point that the story begins to gain another dimension. Because we are no longer talking just about a scene of disrespect, but about mentality, about worldview, about how power structures can be challenged without a single direct confrontation. What seemed small now begins to expand, connecting past decisions ignored behind the scenes, events and revelations yet to come. Before moving on, write a simple but sincere sentence in the comments. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it is precisely here that the story begins to move silently, like those changes that no one notices at the moment, but which later explain everything. Convinced that he came out on top, the billionaire gets up with a half smile on his face. It's not an open laugh. It's that short, arrogant laugh, typical of someone who believes they have just reaffirmed their position in the world. For him, the episode ended there. It was just another demonstration of power, another person put in their place. Another situation where nothing happens to those who have always been protected by privilege. He walks through the room lightly, almost relieved, like someone who has just confirmed an old belief, that money, influence, and reputation shield any action. The conversation around him tries to return to normal, but can't. There's something broken in the air, something that won't be easily repaired. Even so, he doesn't notice. He's too preoccupied with his own internal narrative, with the sense of victory he's built for himself. In his mind, there was no mistake. On the contrary, there was efficiency. It is at this moment that the first signs emerge that this certainty may be illusory. Nothing explicit, nothing that immediately draws attention, just details, a silence that lasts longer than it should. A glance exchanged between two people on the other side of the room, a restrained gesture, as if someone were holding back a reaction. These are small behind-the-scenes details that go unnoticed by those who believe they control everything. And the greater the arrogance, the less capable they are of perceiving these signs. The woman remains seated for a few moments, observing. Her face expresses neither anger nor frustration. There is something deeper, almost indecipherable. When she finally stands, she crosses the billionaire's path without haste, and then, almost as if by chance, she lets slip a short, enigmatic phrase, spoken in a low tone, but firm enough to resonate with the listener. It is not a threat. It is not a direct answer. It is merely an observation, too simple to seem important, too simple to be ignored. He smiles even more, as if that confirms his superiority. A smile that carries irony, disdain, and the conviction that nothing, absolutely nothing, can touch him. That is the fatal mistake, because it's not the phrase itself that matters, but what it carries behind it. A hidden truth, built along a journey he is completely unaware of, a sequence of decisions, strategic choices, and silent paths that don't appear in superficial meetings. As he leaves laughing, the atmosphere begins to change, not visibly, but perceptible to those who know how to observe. People exchange quick messages, whispers emerge, expressions become more serious. Something is being reorganized behind the scenes. It's not haste, it's precision. It's not an emotional reaction, it's calculation. The transformation begins precisely there, in the space between arrogance and consequence. There's a powerful irony in this moment. The billionaire believes he won because no one confronted him, but in reality, it was precisely the absence of confrontation that sealed everything. He confused silence with submission, calmness with fragility, discretion with irrelevance. This misinterpretation says a lot about his mentality and little about the reality surrounding him. Truly prepared, people don't waste energy on unnecessary battles. They wait for the right moment. The story's journey takes on a different rhythm. It's no longer just about an act of humiliation, but about how overconfidence can blind even the most experienced. The impact doesn't come immediately. It builds. It grows in the details, in the corridors, in the decisions that begin to be made away from the eyes of those who believe they are in control. It's the kind of impact that makes no noise when it's born, but changes destinies when it reveals itself. Meanwhile, the billionaire goes about his day as usual. He answers calls, closes deals, reaffirms his position in other circles. The laughter is still there, sustained by years of impunity and privileges that have always worked. What he doesn't know is that some gears have already started turning in another direction. And when that happens, no amount of status can stop the consequences from unfolding. This is the part of the story where everything seems too calm to the point of being deceiving, because when arrogance reaches its peak, it's usually a sign that something is about to change. Not by chance, but through accumulation, through silent decisions, through truths that were hidden in plain sight. Write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it is precisely here that the story ceases to be merely symbolic and transforms into something concrete, definitive, impossible to ignore. The billionaire's laughter still echoes in memory as reality begins to reorganize itself around him, silently, almost elegantly. There are no confrontations, no immediate dramatic scenes, just time doing what it always does when someone believes too much in their own self-protection. A few hours later, perhaps the same day, perhaps the following morning, he receives the notification. It might be a short email with language too formal to ignore. It might be a phone call interrupting an important meeting, or a printed document delivered by someone who asks no questions and shows no emotion. The format matters little. The impact does, because from the first paragraph, something doesn't seem right. The tone is serious, objective, impersonal. There is no room for interpretation. At first, he reads quickly, confidently, like someone who has already solved bigger problems, but then he needs to go back a few lines. He reads again, the company name appears, the responsible department, the position, and suddenly that strange feeling begins to creep up his spine. His mind, accustomed to controlling narratives, tries to reorganize the information. There must be a mistake, an administrative error, something that will be corrected with a phone call. It's always been like this, but this time it's not. As he moves forward, the hidden truth begins to reveal itself with surgical precision. The woman he ignored, the woman he treated as irrelevant, the woman whose authority he publicly questioned. She wasn't an ordinary employee. She wasn't there by chance. She's the owner, or the chairwoman of the board, or the ultimate authority behind the strategic decisions that drive that entire structure. It's the kind of revelation that doesn't scream, but weighs heavily, that doesn't humiliate in public, but dismantles from within. The surrounding space seems to shrink. The silence is no longer comfortable. He finally understands what those exchanged glances meant, that enigmatic phrase, that unwavering calm. Everything made sense. Everything was connected. Her journey, built far from the spotlight, intersects with his precisely at this point. And the impact is devastating, not because of its magnitude, but because of its clarity. There is no possible discussion. There is no immediate negotiation. The power reversal is complete, clear, formal, irrevocable. The man who entered laughing, confident of his impunity, now needs to face the weight of his own decisions. Every previous gesture takes on a new meaning. Every word spoken returns with force. It is poetic justice happening in the most precise way possible. He realizes, perhaps too late, that he confused visibility with real authority. He confused noise with power. He confused silence with weakness. This realization changes everything. It changes how he sees himself, how he reads the environment, how he understands the game he believed he dominated. It's a moment of forced transformation, one that doesn't come by choice, but by impact. Meanwhile, she remains steadfast. There's no need for explicit revenge. Her position speaks for itself. Decisions now rest with her. The behind-the-scenes dealings, previously invisible to him, become all too evident. He understands that he's dealing with someone who has built a solid, strategic, and conscious career. Someone who didn't need to prove anything aloud because she always knew where she stood. This is the kind of revelation that dismantles old narratives, that exposes flaws in mentality, that forces a profound internal review. The billionaire didn't just lose a power struggle. He lost the illusion of absolute control. And when that illusion falls, everything around begins to be re-evaluated, even if silently. The story, however, doesn't end at that moment, because the real consequences don't all reveal themselves at once. They unfold, they accumulate, they deepen. And it is in this space between the revelation and what is yet to come that the tension remains alive, laden with meaning. Before moving on, comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's at this point that the real impact begins to settle in, not as an immediate shock, but as a truth that weighs heavily and can no longer be ignored. The billionaire no longer laughs. The smile that once seemed automatic disappears, replaced by a dense, almost awkward silence. There is no audience for this fall of pride. It happens internally, where no one applauds but everything echoes. He finally understands that the consequences don't need to be loud to be definitive. Decisions that once seemed untouchable are now being cautiously reviewed. The words he chose without thinking become measured. The mindset that always guided him, that power is imposed, that respect is demanded, begins to falter in the face of the reality that presents itself, because true power, he realizes too late, doesn't need to humiliate to exist. It sustains itself through posture, preparation, and the clarity of someone who knows exactly where they are and why. There is something profoundly transformative happening in this moment. It's not about public punishment, nor about explicit revenge. It's about understanding, about realizing that the world doesn't function only on the visible surface. There are behind-the-scenes events, silent journeys, decisions made long before someone feels entitled to judge another. The hidden truth always finds a way to emerge, even when ignored, even when underestimated. The billionaire begins to mentally revisit every detail of that initial scene. The tone he used, the look he averted, the way he belittled someone without even knowing who they were. And this internal review hurts more than any external reprimand, because it exposes something difficult to admit. The fragility behind the arrogance, the need to feel superior when in reality no one is. Meanwhile, the woman continues her journey with the same serenity as before. Nothing about her changes drastically because nothing needed to change. She was always prepared. She always knew the weight of her position. She always understood that certain revelations don't need to be announced, only experienced. That's the greatest lesson. Those who truly have authority don't rush to prove themselves. They observe. They act at the precise moment. This story leaves a mark because it touches on something universal. All of us, to some extent, have been judged by our appearance, our current position, by stereotypes that don't tell the whole story. And many have also been wrong in their judgment. The impact lies precisely there, in that silent mirror that the narrative offers. It doesn't point fingers, but invites reflection on how we treat those we don't know, on the decisions we make when we think no one can reach us. The fall of pride doesn't happen all at once. It spreads. It appears in interrupted conversations, in revisited opportunities, in certainties that cease to exist. And, paradoxically, it is in this process that the possibility of real learning arises. Because when pride falls, something needs to fill the space left behind. Either awareness grows or emptiness grows. What remains is the lesson that doesn't fade easily. Respect always returns, but not always in the way we expect. Sometimes it returns as silence, sometimes as a consequence, sometimes as a revelation that changes the entire interpretation of reality. And understanding this requires maturity. It requires a change of mindset that few are willing to face. This story doesn't end with a final gesture or a catchy phrase. It continues to reverberate, connecting past decisions to present results and preparing the ground for developments that are not yet fully apparent. Because every journey of true transformation leaves traces, and not all of them are immediately visible. Before moving on, write in the comments, lessons that last. If you've made it this far, it's because this story resonated with you on some level. Maybe because you've seen something similar before, maybe because you've experienced it firsthand, or maybe because certain truths simply resonate differently when told in the right way. And that's exactly why it's worth being here. This channel exists to tell stories that provoke reflection, that reveal behind-the-scenes aspects, and that help you see the power, respect, and twists of life more clearly. If you feel this type of content resonates with you, subscribing is simply a way to continue following these conversations. If you want, also leave a comment saying you made it to the end. You can write something simple, like "This message was for me," or "I'm with you until the end." This creates a real connection here and shows that this story found who it needed to find. And if throughout the video you felt that moment of identification, that silent thought of "this makes sense," the like comes almost like a handshake, a way of saying that the exchange was worthwhile. And before you leave, take a look at the next video that appears on the side. It directly addresses everything we've just been reflecting on. Click and continue watching it.